You traded a diamond for glass.
Picture this. I'm in our small dining room. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic potatoes thick in the air, my heart thudding fast. It's our 16th anniversary, and I've spent all day setting up this dinner to remind my wife Sarah that we still had something good despite the rough years. Our 17-year-old daughter Emma was supposed to share this family moment too. I'd ironed the tablecloth, lit candles, and even cut flowers from the tiny backyard to make a centerpiece. I'd also bought a small gift, nothing fancy, but full of meaning. My hands shook as I set the silver-wrapped box with a red ribbon on the table in front of Sarah. I'd tied that ribbon myself after watching a YouTube clip and had practiced what I'd say all day, talking to the bathroom mirror like a nervous teen. 16 years, babe. We've pushed through so much. This is for you. Before I could get the words out, Sarah glanced at the box, then at me, and rolled her eyes so hard I almost heard it. The look on her face, pure contempt, was worse than any fight we'd ever had. "You're still jobless," she said, her voice slicing the warm air. "Couldn't even buy a decent gift? Another cheap trinket from a dollar store?" I froze, mouth open, every word I'd practiced gone. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this wasn't about money, that I'd poured myself into this night in that little box. Then Emma chimed in, her teenage sneer sharper than her mother's words. "We don't need your cheap box, Dad. Take it and go. You're just embarrassing us now." She didn't even look up from her phone, just flicked her fingers like I was some bug she wanted gone. The casual cruelty hit like a punch. I stared at them. My wife, my daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Candlelight threw shadows across their faces while my chest tightened. For a moment, I thought about yelling, flipping the table, demanding they open the box to see what I'd done. Instead, a soft laugh slipped out. Not loud, just a quiet chuckle I couldn't stop. They both looked at me like I'd lost it. Sarah's brows shot up. Emma finally looked up with a puzzled frown. "You sure about that?" I asked, voice calm, almost playful. I leaned back, arms crossed, watching them squirm. They had no idea what was in that box. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd built while they wrote me off as a failure. Sarah pushed the box toward me with the back of her hand as if it were trash and stood, her chair scraping the floor. "Get out," she said, flat and final. Emma nodded, smirking like she'd won. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked out without a word. The cool night air hit my face as the lock clicked behind me and their muffled laughter carried through the door. Now I need to tell you the whole backstory because without it, none of this will make sense. A decade ago, life felt like a dream I never wanted to end. I can still picture it. I was in the kitchen of our old house with its creaky wood floors and a big bay window looking out on a real backyard, flipping pancakes on a quiet Sunday morning. Emma, only 7 then, sat at the table in her favorite princess pajamas, eyes bright and hair in messy pigtails, giggling as she begged for Mickey Mouse pancakes. "Daddy, make his ears bigger," she'd shout, clapping her little hands, and I'd laugh, adding more batter just to see that huge smile spread across her face. Around 9, Sarah would stroll in wearing her silk pajamas, hair charmingly wild from sleep. She'd hug me from behind and kiss my neck like we were still new lovers. "You're spoiling her," she'd tease, but her voice was soft and full of real warmth. Back then, I ran my own engineering firm, Mitchell & Associates. It was small but growing fast, bringing in contracts that paid for that house, trips to Disney World, and a comfortable life. I'd built it all from scratch. Long nights drawing designs, early mornings driving across counties to meet clients, weekends learning the latest CAD programs to stay ahead. It felt amazing to see Sarah beam with pride when she introduced me at parties, or to hear Emma brag to friends about her dad's super cool job building bridges and towers. I thought we were unshakable. Just the 3 of us against the world. Then it all crashed. I landed a huge city contract to redesign a commercial complex, worth more than all my past work combined. I poured everything into it, every cent of capital, every hope for our future, even a second mortgage on our house. But at the last moment, the city pulled out, blaming budget cuts, and my firm collapsed. Creditors called nonstop. Bills piled up like snowdrifts. I had to let my team go one by one until I sat alone in an empty office, staring at a phone that never rang. I sold what was left for next to nothing, just enough to keep us afloat a little longer, but the damage to our lives was already spreading. Sarah's warmth vanished soon after the foreclosure notice arrived. She stopped hugging me, stopped asking about my day. "You need to fix this fast," she'd say, her tone sharp and cold, like I was a burden, not her husband. I tried everything. I took small engineering gigs hours away. I fixed neighbors' cars for cash. I even drove for rideshare apps, grinding 12 to 14 hours a day to cover groceries and bills. Still, it never brought us back to the life we had. That's all they cared about. 6 months later, the house was gone, and we moved to a cramped rental in a rough neighborhood. Thin walls, a leaky roof dripping into buckets, old appliances that barely worked. Emma was 13 then, at that age where appearances matter most, and I could see her drifting away from me. She'd roll her eyes when I offered to read her a bedtime story, muttering, "I'm not a kid, Dad," with a sharp edge in her voice. I brushed it off as normal teen moodiness, but it wasn't. She was copying Sarah's contempt, repeating her complaints word for word. "Why don't we have nice things anymore?" she'd demand whenever her friends had something she wanted. I'd catch them whispering in the kitchen, both glancing at me like I didn't belong. I kept hustling, grabbing any job I could to keep the lights on. But to them, I wasn't the man I used to be. They didn't see the 18-hour days or the nights I lay awake worrying how to fix everything. All they saw was the loss of the big house with the 3-car garage, the luxury trips, the designer clothes, and the private school. And slowly, I realized with dread that they'd loved the lifestyle, not me. I'd come home after a long day with my hands covered in grease from fixing someone's transmission for $40, exhausted and aching. And Sarah wouldn't even look up from her phone when I walked through the door. "You smell like motor oil," she'd say, wrinkling her nose in obvious disgust. And Emma would giggle from the couch like it was the funniest joke she'd ever heard. I'd stand there in the doorway of my own home, feeling smaller and more worthless every single time, wondering where my loving family had disappeared to. I tried talking to Sarah directly once, late at night, when Emma was finally asleep upstairs. "We can get through this together," I said, reaching across the couch for her hand the way I used to when we were young and broke and happy. She pulled away from me like I'd burned her, her eyes completely cold and distant. "You lost everything, David. Everything we built together. What exactly is there left to get through?" That stung worse than anything else she could have said, because I realized in that moment that she didn't believe in me anymore. She'd given up on us, on me, on any possibility that I could rebuild what we'd lost. Emma stopped asking me to make her special pancakes on weekends, stopped calling me daddy, stopped hugging me goodnight. She'd walk past me in the narrow hallway with earbuds in, like I was completely invisible, just another piece of furniture she had to navigate around. But here's the part they never knew about, the secret I'd been carrying for years. 5 years before my engineering business collapsed, my old college buddy Mike had come to me one evening, practically vibrating with nervous excitement, begging me to invest in his tech startup. We met at this dingy sports bar near campus, and he spread out these hand-drawn diagrams on napkins, explaining his vision with the kind of passion I hadn't seen since we were studying together 20 years earlier. "It's going to be revolutionary, David," he'd said, his eyes wide and intense. "AI-powered logistics software specifically designed for small businesses. Nobody else is doing anything remotely like this. The market is completely untapped. I just need seed money to get the prototype off the ground and start attracting serious investors." I was doing really well financially then, riding high on a series of successful projects. So I wrote him a personal check for $75,000, almost all of my personal savings that I'd been slowly accumulating over the years. I never told Sarah about it because I knew she would have absolutely freaked out, called it gambling with our family's future, demanded I get the money back immediately. After my company crashed and our life became a daily struggle just to survive, I completely forgot about Mike's little project. I figured it had probably fizzled out like 90% of startups do within their first year, and I wasn't about to dig through old bank records to confirm another loss when we were already struggling just to pay rent and keep food on the table. But then, 3 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon that I'll never forget, I got a call from Mike completely out of the blue. I was under the hood of a neighbor's Honda, trying to diagnose a transmission problem for $25 when my phone started buzzing. "David, please tell me you're still alive and kicking." He laughed, and I could hear this massive grin in his voice that immediately transported me back to our college days. "Man, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. We're going public next month. That $75K you gave me 5 years ago, it's worth a little bit more than that now." I was covered in grease up to my elbows, sweat dripping down my face from the summer heat, and I almost dropped my phone in complete shock. Mike's company had taken off quietly at first, building a solid client base among small businesses across the Midwest, then exploded like a rocket ship when the AI revolution really started taking off. They'd built this incredibly sophisticated logistics tool that every small business owner in America suddenly realized they desperately needed. And when they went public, my original investment multiplied beyond my wildest imagination. I didn't tell anyone. Not Sarah, not Emma, not even my brother Jake, who'd been letting me crash on his couch during the worst periods. I just kept reinvesting the profits, watching the numbers climb steadily in complete silence while Sarah and Emma continued treating me like a complete failure and embarrassment to the family. Over the course of that year, I watched my investment grow into something I'd never dreamed possible. Last spring, I finally cashed out a substantial portion of it, enough to make me worth over $12 million, more money than I'd ever imagined when I was running my little engineering consulting firm and thinking I was doing pretty well for myself. I quietly and carefully moved all of it into completely new accounts that Sarah knew nothing about, totally separate from our joint checking account that she'd been slowly draining to pay for her increasingly expensive tastes and lifestyle maintenance. Then I started planning something special for our anniversary. I set up a brand new company with Mike's help and guidance, an investment firm called Phoenix Ventures, focused on finding and funding the next generation of innovative startups. I bought a penthouse apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the entire city. I paid cash for a beach house in Malibu with direct ocean access, and I got myself a Black American Express Centurion card with essentially unlimited spending power. That little box I tried to give Sarah at our anniversary dinner, it wasn't some cheap trinket from a discount store like she assumed. Inside was legal documentation for my new company, the deed to that California beach house, and that unlimited credit card. I'd wanted to surprise her, to say, look, I'm not just back. I'm better and more successful than I ever was before. We can start completely fresh and build something even more amazing together. But she couldn't even be bothered to open it before dismissing me entirely. The week after they kicked me out of my own anniversary dinner, I moved my few belongings into my brother Jake's spare room and started getting very interesting phone calls from our bank. I'd quietly removed my name from all our joint accounts the day before that anniversary dinner, and now the automatic mortgage payment had bounced for the first time in 16 years. Just confirming that the payment was declined, sir. The account appears to be overdrawn, the banker said in that professionally neutral tone they use for these situations. I leaned back in Jake's old recliner, actually smiling for the first time in months. That's not my problem anymore, I told him calmly. I'm not on that account as of yesterday. A few days later, my buddy Tommy at the car dealership called me with another update. Hey David, just giving you a heads up. Your wife's lease on that Lexus SUV is about to be repossessed. It's technically in your name and she's missed 2 payments now. Go ahead and take it, I said, sipping my morning coffee and watching the sunrise through Jake's kitchen window. I'm not making any more payments on it. That car was Sarah's absolute pride and joy. Sleek, black, leather interior, the kind of vehicle she loved showing off to her friends at the country club. I could perfectly picture her face when the repo truck showed up to tow it away. Emma whining and complaining about how she was supposed to get to her part-time job and social activities. The phone calls from them started almost immediately after that. Sarah first, her voice shrill and panicked through the voicemail. You better help us fix this, David. This is your mess too, and you can't just walk away from your responsibilities. I didn't pick up, just let it play while I ate Jake's leftover meatloaf and watched the evening news. Then Emma, her tone sharp, but starting to sound genuinely shaky for the first time. Dad, what's going on? Mom's totally freaking out about money and the car and everything. Call me back, okay? I didn't call back. The house payments, the car lease, all the monthly bills they'd gotten used to. They'd built their entire comfortable lifestyle on the foundation I provided, and now that foundation had been completely removed. Meanwhile, I kept working diligently on building Phoenix Ventures into something substantial, meeting with promising startup founders, signing investment checks with that Black American Express card, while their familiar world slowly crumbled around them. Word travels incredibly fast in a small town like ours. My neighbor texted me the following week. Saw some slick-looking guy in a BMW peel out of your old driveway last night around midnight. Looked pretty pissed off about something. I wasn't surprised at all by this development. Mike had done some discreet investigation work for me and discovered that Sarah's boss, Kevin, the guy she'd been having a secret affair with for over 8 months, was living a complete and total lie. Bad real estate investments, a failing consulting side business, credit card debts piling up everywhere he looked. He'd been strategically leaning on Sarah's perceived financial stability, essentially using her house and her steady income, which was actually my money keeping everything afloat, to prop up his own rapidly failing lifestyle and business ventures. When the mortgage payments started bouncing and that luxury SUV mysteriously disappeared from the driveway, Kevin vanished faster than smoke in a hurricane. I actually laughed out loud when I heard this news, imagining Sarah's face when her successful and sophisticated boyfriend walked out on her without explanation, leaving her alone with nothing but wounded pride and mounting bills. Emma started posting these vague but dramatic things on her social media accounts. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know why, and some people really suck and ruin everything. I'd see them pop up on my phone occasionally and feel a tiny pang of sympathy. She was still my daughter, after all, and I remembered the sweet little girl she used to be. But those feelings faded quickly when I remembered her smirking at me that anniversary night, enthusiastically choosing her mother's side without even a moment's hesitation. The tone of their phone calls changed dramatically after Kevin bailed on them. Sarah's voice got noticeably softer, more desperate and pleading. "Please, David, just talk to me for 5 minutes. We can figure this out together like we always used to." Then Emma, much quieter now, almost scared sounding. "Dad, I'm really sorry about everything I said. Can you please just call me back? Please?" I let them stack up, dozens and dozens of increasingly desperate voicemails that I never returned. They'd kicked me out of my own house, laughed at my gift, treated me like absolute garbage for years. Now they were drowning financially and emotionally, expecting me to throw them a life preserver like nothing had ever happened. One evening about a month later, I was standing on Jake's back porch with a beer in my hand, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple, when my phone rang again. Sarah's name lit up the screen, and something, curiosity maybe, or just a desire for closure, made me answer it. Her voice came through small and shaky, almost unrecognizable. "David, oh God, please don't hang up on me. I miss you so much it's eliminating me. Can we meet somewhere neutral and just talk face to face?" I let the silence stretch out for a long time, listening to her breathe unevenly, picturing her sitting in that cramped rental house with no car in the driveway, no Kevin to lean on, no steady money coming in anymore to maintain her lifestyle. "You threw away a diamond to chase after costume jewelry," I said quietly, my voice completely steady and calm. She didn't say anything back, just made this little broken sniffling sound that might have made me feel sorry for her a few months earlier. I hung up without saying goodbye. That was it. No yelling, no accusations, no dramatic speeches about how they'd wronged me. Just the simple truth, delivered plainly. About 6 months after the anniversary disaster, I was pushing a shopping cart through the local grocery store, picking up ingredients for dinner, when I saw Emma standing by the discount bins near the back of the store. She was holding a package of generic ramen noodles and looked completely different from the polished teenager who'd sneered at me months earlier. Hair messy and pulled back in a sloppy ponytail, oversized hoodie hanging off her thin shoulders. No makeup. No trace of that entitled attitude she'd carried for so long. Her cart contained just a few desperately cheap items. Store-brand soap, day-old bread marked down for quick sale, some dented cans from the discount rack. When she looked up and saw me approaching, her eyes went wide like she'd seen a ghost walking through the produce section. "Dad?" she whispered, nearly dropping the ramen package, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the store's background music. I stopped my cart, the wheels squeaking against the polished tile floor. "Hey there," I said, keeping my voice completely neutral and giving nothing away. She took a hesitant step closer, clutching that package tighter against her chest. "Can we talk for a minute, please?" I nodded slowly and pushed my cart off to the side, leaning against it casually. "Sure, go ahead." "Things are really, really bad, Dad. Worse than you probably know. Mom's completely falling apart mentally. The house is gone and we're living in this terrible apartment complex now where the neighbors fight all night. Kevin left without any explanation and she cries constantly, like all the time." I listened carefully with my arms crossed, keeping my facial expression steady and unrevealing. I could easily picture Sarah unraveling completely without her perfect suburban life to maintain. But I didn't feel that old familiar urge to rush in and fix everything for everyone. Emma kept going, her words tumbling out faster and faster. I didn't know it would get like this. I honestly thought Mom was right about everything, that you were just somehow holding us back from something better. But now everything's completely destroyed, and I don't know what to do or who to turn to. She looked up at me then with tears starting to form in her eyes, pleading and desperate, in a way I'd never seen before. I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't mean any of those horrible things I said to you. I was just being a stupid kid following Mom's lead. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air from the nearby frozen food section hitting my back. You were a teenager following your mother's example. I can understand that part. But you stood right there, Emma, while she kicked me out of my own house on our anniversary. You laughed along with her like it was all some big joke. That's not something I can just forget overnight like it never happened. Her face completely crumpled and she nodded rapidly, wiping her nose with the sleeve of that oversized hoodie. I know I messed up so badly. I miss you so much. I didn't realize how much I actually needed you until everything fell apart. I looked at her carefully, really looked, and saw glimpses of the innocent little girl who used to climb into my lap every evening and beg me to read her favorite bedtime stories. But that sweet child was buried deep under years and years of choosing Sarah's side, years of treating me like an embarrassment and failure. Trust is an incredibly fragile thing, I said gently but firmly. Once it breaks completely, it doesn't just snap back together like nothing ever happened. You hurt me very deeply, Emma. Both of you did, in ways that are hard to explain. I'm not saying the door is closed forever, but I'm nowhere near ready to pretend none of this happened. She nodded again, tears now spilling freely down her cheeks. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I just wanted you to know that I was sorry. That I understand now. I didn't hug her or make any promises about the future. I couldn't bring myself to do that yet. I just gave her a small, sad nod and said, Take care of yourself, Emma. I mean that, before pushing my cart past her and continuing with my shopping. That same night, an email notification popped up on my phone from Sarah. David, I was angry and stupid and completely wrong about everything. Please, can we just meet for coffee somewhere and talk like civilized adults? I stared at her message for a long time, then typed back, The man you insulted and rejected is gone forever. The man you need now doesn't exist for you anymore. I hit send and closed my laptop. She never replied to that. Fast forward another full year, and I'm standing in the spacious kitchen of my downtown penthouse, the rich smell of perfectly grilled steaks and roasted garlic bread filling the air, the warm sound of genuine laughter and animated conversation echoing through the high-ceilinged space. It was a small dinner party. Nothing flashy or pretentious, just the people who'd actually stood by me through the worst period of my life. Jake was there, leaning back comfortably in his chair with a craft beer, his familiar gravelly voice cutting through the general chatter as he told some ridiculous fishing story from our childhood that had everyone cracking up. Mike sat directly across from him, grinning widely and loosening his silk tie after a particularly long day at the office, raising his wine glass high in an impromptu toast. To the man who believed in me and my crazy dreams when absolutely nobody else would take the risk. My executive assistant Tara was there too. She'd gradually become much more friend than employee over the past several months, joking easily with the small but incredibly solid team I'd assembled at Phoenix Ventures. These were genuinely good people, smart and hardworking and loyal, who'd helped turn my modest investment firm into something substantial and respected in the business community. And then there was Rachel, sitting close beside me at the head of the table, her dark hair catching the warm light from the chandelier, her laugh soft but bright and completely genuine. I'd met her at a business conference about 8 months earlier and been immediately struck by her intelligence and directness. She was sharp, steady, with an impressive ability to see through people's nonsense that reminded me strongly of Jake. She didn't need anything from me financially, didn't push for more commitment than I was ready to give, didn't try to change me or fix me. She just showed up consistently with her dry sense of humor and genuinely kind eyes, and somehow she'd become an integral part of this new life I was carefully building. The dining table was crowded with delicious food, perfectly cooked steaks, herb-roasted potatoes, a massive Caesar salad Jake had insisted on preparing himself using his grandmother's secret recipe, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars, framing our little gathering like a picture I never thought I'd have the chance to see. I looked around slowly, soaking it all in, and realized with something like wonder that Sarah and Emma hadn't crossed my mind in weeks. They'd become distant ghosts from a previous life, shadows from my past that no longer had any power over my present happiness or future plans. After that awkward grocery store encounter with Emma, after Sarah's pathetic unanswered email, they'd simply faded away into irrelevance. No more desperate phone calls, no more pleading letters forwarded from old addresses, just blessed silence. I'd heard through a few mutual acquaintances that they'd been forced to move to an even smaller apartment in the worst part of town, that Sarah was working some humiliating retail job at a discount store, that Emma was barely scraping by at community college while working part-time at a fast food restaurant to help pay their basic expenses. I didn't actively check up on them or dig for more specific details. They simply weren't part of my story anymore, and I liked it that way. We finished our meal, and I stepped out onto the wraparound balcony, the cool night air brushing gently against my face, a glass of excellent whiskey warming in my hand. Rachel followed me out a moment later, leaning on the polished steel railing beside me, her shoulder close, but not quite touching mine. "Beautiful night," she said easily, and I nodded, staring out at the glittering skyline that was now my view every single morning and evening. "Yeah, it really is. Feels good to be here." She never asked about my past. She was remarkably intuitive that way. But I could tell she understood there was significant emotional weight behind some of my quieter moments. Inside the apartment, Jake's booming laugh echoed out, Mike's animated voice rising over it as he launched into another enthusiastic story about some new startup opportunity, and I found myself smiling genuinely for what felt like the 1,000th time that evening. This was my real family now. Not blood or legal obligation, but conscious choice. People who'd chosen to be part of my life. Not just when I had something material to offer them, but people who'd been there when I seemingly had nothing at all. I pulled out that little anniversary box from my jacket pocket, the same one Sarah had shoved away like actual garbage 16 months earlier. I kept it with me all this time, not as some shrine to them, but as a tangible reminder of how far I'd traveled from that humiliating night. I opened it carefully, looking at the legal papers still inside. That black credit card still gleaming under the balcony lights. On a fresh scrap of paper, I wrote with a pen from my shirt pocket. "To the man I used to be, thank you for surviving long enough and staying strong enough to become who I am today." I folded it up neatly, slipped it into the box next to everything else, and closed the lid with a satisfying click. Rachel glanced over with mild curiosity, but didn't pry or ask invasive questions. "What's that?" "Just a note to myself," I said, sliding the box back into my jacket pocket, saying a final goodbye to some old emotional baggage that I don't need to carry anymore. She nodded like she understood completely, and we stood there together in comfortable silence while the city hummed with vibrant life far below us. I thought about that disastrous anniversary night that now seemed like it had happened to someone else entirely. Sarah's look of utter disgust, Emma's casual cruelty, the way they'd both stared at me like I was less than nothing. They'd intended to break me completely, to toss me out like trash they were tired of looking at, to replace me with someone they thought was more worthy of their time and attention. Instead, without realizing it, they'd handed me the greatest gift imaginable: complete freedom to become the man I was always meant to be, without their constant negativity and judgment weighing me down. The dinner party wound down slowly and pleasantly. Jake clapped me firmly on the back as he headed out, promising to call about our planned fishing trip next weekend. Mike shook my hand enthusiastically and promised to email me about a fascinating new investment opportunity he'd discovered. Tara gave me a quick warm hug before catching her rideshare home. Rachel stayed behind to help with the dishes, her presence steady and calming in the very best possible way. "Really good people you've got there," she said, carefully drying a wine glass with a dish towel, and I nodded with complete agreement. The absolute best. I'm lucky to have them. Later that night, alone on the balcony again with the vast city spread out below me like a carpet of glittering possibilities, I looked at that anniversary box one final time. Then I set it down gently on the ledge and walked back inside to where Rachel was waiting. This wasn't about Sarah and Emma anymore. It wasn't about betrayal or revenge or proving anything to anyone who'd wronged me. It was simply about me, the man who'd survived complete devastation and systematically built something infinitely better from the ashes of his old life. Phoenix Ventures was thriving beyond even my most optimistic projections. Rachel and I were seriously discussing moving in together and maybe getting engaged sometime next year. Jake said I seemed like my old self again for the first time in years, and he was absolutely right about that. The beautiful irony of the whole situation was almost poetic. They thought they were discarding a broken, useless man who had absolutely nothing left to offer anyone. What they'd actually done was set free someone who was about to become everything they desperately wished they could have back in their lives. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't planning elaborate schemes or getting even in obvious ways. Sometimes it's simply becoming so genuinely successful and happy that your former enemies become completely irrelevant to your daily existence. I don't hate Sarah and Emma anymore. I don't waste energy thinking about them at all. And maybe that's the biggest victory of all.